I think anybody who's going to be doing any research with these drugs needs to have as much personal preparation as possible, and not just necessarily through taking psychedelics on their own, but psychological, spiritual training and education. And when I was sort of positioning myself to get ready to do the DMT research, I knew I would need to have all of my faculties, as many faculties as I could in order to be able to understand and hold and comprehend and be able to manage the kinds of unusual states I was expecting that I'd be hearing about. And I may not have been quite so conscious of this when I began both my spiritual training and my psychological work, but as a teenager and as an early adult, I started getting involved in my own psychotherapeutic process. And around the mid-'80s or so, maybe 2-3 years before I began the application process for getting the DMT work underway, I found myself a Freudian psychoanalyst in Albuquerque who I trusted and liked and felt I could work with. And I always believed that Freudian on-the-couch psychoanalytic work was kind of the gold standard of psychotherapy. And because I'm a Westerner and I'm trained in the Western biomedical and psychological model of how the mind works and how personal problems both develop and can be unraveled, I thought it was a great opportunity to begin psychoanalytic work. And this was pretty strict Freudian analysis, 4 days a week, even 5 days a week on the couch, with my analyst behind me. And I just learned a lot about my mind and my problems and my hopes and my wishes and my desires and my fears and how I, related to all of those. I also learned a lot about the feeling of being really dependent emotionally on somebody else, a lot more so than maybe even as a child, because as an adult you can sort of see it from a more mature perspective. And one of the things that happens in psychoanalytic work is you become totally, hopelessly, emotionally dependent on your analyst. You crave seeing him 5 days a week wasn't enough. I was absolutely in love. But at the same time, I was an adult. I was a physician. I had it pretty well together. And I knew it was just a psychological process I was going through. It was both painful and exhilarating at the same time. And I also sort of knew in the back of my mind that this training would really come in handy when I was working with people in deep psychedelic states. I knew that the emotional openness and vulnerability that my volunteers were probably most likely going to feel, I was learning about that myself firsthand. And I also was able to kind of model my own feelings about how I would respond supervising trips based on my analyst's response to me. There were some days in my psychoanalytic work that I was just flopping about, thrashing about on the couch, like I had taken a drug. It was a completely non-drug state of consciousness. And I learned from my analyst how to just sit there and really hold emotionally the intense maelstrom of feelings that people can experience. So from both a training, a sort of a professional training point of view, and sort of an emotional training point of view is really an invaluable experience. I was about halfway through that by the time I began the application process for the DMT study. And actually, from a professional point of view, just being able to discuss with him my hopes and my fears and my anxieties and all of the multiple intentions behind my desire to be doing this work, I could work out with him too. Was my interest in doing this work just to prove I could do it? Was it because everybody told me I couldn't. Was it to impress my father? Was it to be a hero? Was it to blow it somehow and, you know, bring scorn and heap abuse upon myself? I mean, it's a very complicated thing, especially because I had no idea what I was getting into. It had been so long since anybody had done research in the U.S. That I really felt I had to be prepared emotionally and psychologically for what it was going to be like. So I didn't want to be surprised by my motivations when I actually began getting closer and closer to doing the work. So that was a crucial part of personal preparation. That was about a 4-year process. And I'd had about 4 or 5 years of face-to-face psychotherapy even before that. But this psychoanalytic course of treatment was kind of the coup de grace of my personal work.